I never expected my first day in the Philippines to feel like stepping into another universe. And yet, there I was, a wide-eyed Russian student, stepping off the bus and into the chaos of a small Filipino school in a coastal town. The sun was relentless, the air thick with humidity, and the noise. Oh, the noise. Children running, teachers shouting, tricycles honking outside, the distant laughter of neighbors, and the ever-present sound of karaoke drifting from someone else's home. It was sensory overload in the most delightful way. I had arrived on a scholarship program for international students, the kind that promised cultural exchange and academic excellence. What it didn't mention was how unprepared I would be for the warmth, literally and emotionally, that awaited me. The first thing I noticed was how the other students stared. Not in a mean way, but in that, "We've never seen someone like you" way. I had expected whispers, maybe some shyness, but their curiosity was genuine, bright, and unthreatening. "Uy, is that a Russian?" a girl whispered to her friend, barely hiding her giggle. "Yes, I think," came the reply. I froze. Should I say hello? Smile? Wave awkwardly like a tourist? I had no idea what was socially acceptable here. In Russia, kids are reserved. Polite smiles are measured. Here, everything was exaggerated. Expressions, laughter, even the way they raised their hands in class. Then came the introductions. A teacher with a kind, weathered face motioned me forward. "Class, meet your new student. She is from Russia." Suddenly all eyes were on me, and then as if on cue, a small boy raised his hand and said loudly, "Do you know how to dance, Tinikling?" I blinked. Tinikling? Was that a math concept? A new science experiment? "No," I said honestly, trying not to laugh. "Then you must learn," another student chimed in. This was the first of many surprises. In Russian schools, the first day is about schedules, rules, and memorizing names. Here, the first day was about dancing, laughter, and, strangely enough, making me feel like I had already belonged. First lessons, beyond the classroom. Classes began the next day, and the differences were staggering. The curriculum looked similar on paper: math, science, English, but the energy in the classroom was like nothing I had experienced in Moscow. In Russia, discipline is strict. Here, humor was a tool for learning. Teachers would pause mid-lesson to crack jokes. Students would answer questions with playful exaggerations. One moment, I'd be calculating fractions. The next moment, everyone was giggling because a boy had accidentally written banana instead of banana tree in his science notebook. But it wasn't just the lessons. It was how students treated each other. Sharing was the unspoken rule. One afternoon, I forgot my lunch, a simple sandwich I had packed in haste. Within minutes, a girl appeared at my desk with a small container of rice, a slice of fried fish, and a piece of mango. "Eat," she said simply. I stared. In Russia, you might offer someone food, but rarely would a classmate take the initiative like that. I hesitated. "Just try it," she insisted. I took a bite and the flavors exploded. Sweet, salty, tangy. But it wasn't just the food. It was the gesture. The generosity without expectation. That S when I realized that Filipino students carry something bigger than textbooks in their backpacks. They carry a culture of kindness. The humor of misunderstandings. Of course, not everything was smooth. My accent and lack of local knowledge made me the subject of many humorous situations. I learned the word po the hard way. In Filipino culture, saying po is a sign of respect, added at the end of sentences when speaking to elders. But I misunderstood it completely. At the canteen, I asked an older woman, "Excuse me, po," pointing at a plate of food. She paused, looked at me, and laughed. "No, po. You say it after a sentence, not before asking for food." Everyone at the table burst into laughter. I turned bright red, but the laughter was never mocking, just gentle, welcoming, and somehow bonding. Then came Filipino humor in its purest form, pranks and playful teasing. One day, a boy quietly swapped my chair with one half the size. I didn't notice until I sat down and felt like I had shrunk. He winked at me, and I laughed, half from amusement, half from the ridiculousness of it all. Small victories and cultural wins. The first month was a whirlwind of adjustments. I had to learn local expressions, navigate the intense midday heat, and figure out the right level of bowing, smiling, or nodding. But each small victory felt monumental. I learned to ride a tricycle without fear, mastered a few Filipino phrases, and even survived my first jeepney ride, squeezed between 6 other passengers and a small bundle of live chickens. Each day I laughed more, bonded more, and slowly felt less like an outsider. My classmates also taught me about their world. One boy, eager to impress me, insisted that I try Halo Halo, a dessert I had only heard about online. He topped it with purple yam, sweet beans, and shaved ice, practically shoving the spoon toward me. Eat, like this, he said, demonstrating exaggeratedly. I ate. I liked it. I loved it. I laughed. And in that moment, I realized that the Filipino way of teaching wasn't just about facts. It was about experiences, connections, and emotions. The first heartwarming moment. The real turning point came during a school event. It was the Buwan ng Wika, a celebration of Filipino language and culture. Students wore traditional attire, danced folk dances, and sang songs. I had been asked to join a group performing a Russian folk dance, but in Filipino style, somehow blending the two cultures. I was nervous, very nervous. The music started, I stumbled. My classmates laughed, but instead of mocking, they clapped and cheered me on. Slowly, I found my rhythm, my movements blending awkwardly but joyfully with theirs. By the end of the song, everyone was cheering, not just for the dance, but for the effort, the laughter, the unity. I realized something that day. Being a Russian student in a Filipino school wasn't just about surviving a new environment. It was about discovering what humanity feels like when it's generous, playful, and warm. By the end of my first semester, I had learned far more than the curriculum could ever teach me. I had learned patience, humility, humor, and the transformative power of kindness. I had discovered a world where laughter and learning coexist, where sharing a meal is as important as acing a test, and where cultural differences are celebrated, not feared. And yet, I knew there was more to come. More lessons, more funny misunderstandings, more moments that would tug at my heart while teaching me about life, love, and friendship. Because in a Filipino school, even a Russian student like me could find a second home. The second semester began with a sense of anticipation. I had survived the first round of culture shock, and I thought I understood what life in a Filipino school would be like. I was wrong. This time, the surprises were subtler, deeper, and even more transformative. New friends, new lessons. One of the first things I noticed was how friendships formed so naturally here. In Russia, we tend to form bonds slowly, cautiously. But in the Philippines, friendships seem to spark instantly, fueled by laughter, shared snacks, and playful teasing. There was Liza, a girl with a contagious smile and a voice that could stop arguments mid-sentence. She took it upon herself to teach me Filipino properly. Not the classroom kind of Filipino, but the street, heart of the neighborhood kind. Okay, today we learn Tagalog slang, she announced one morning, tossing me a small bag of local snacks. I stared at her suspiciously. Slang? I already barely understand the language. No worries. It's fun, she said with a grin. You will sound like a real local by next week, or you will make everyone laugh trying. And laugh, I did. Every day. I remember the first time she taught me kilig. I had no idea what it meant. You know, that feeling when your heart flutters and you can't stop smiling? She explained, waving her hands dramatically. I tried using it in class. I feel... kilig? Everyone paused. Then they laughed so hard I thought I might get expelled for disturbing the class. But it was the most fun I had ever had learning a new language. Food, the gateway to understanding. If laughter was the key to friendship, food was the secret passage to acceptance. Filipino students treated every meal as an event, not a necessity. They would invite me to share, sneak me bites of their favorite dishes, or surprise me with merienda, small afternoon snacks that felt like a feast. One memorable afternoon, I was invited to try pancit bihon, a stir-fried noodle dish. I had never eaten anything like it in Russia. The textures, the flavor, the combination of sweet and savory, it was foreign, yet instantly comforting. Try it with calamansi, a boy said, handing me a tiny lime. I squeezed it nervously over my noodles. The tang made me pause, then smile. Wow, I said simply. This is amazing. He grinned. Welcome to Filipino food heaven. Over time, I learned that meals were about connection, not just nourishment. If a student had a birthday, the whole class would gather, sing, laugh, and share cake, snacks, or even home-cooked meals. No one was left out. I couldn't help but notice how different this was from my experience in Russia, where birthdays were quieter, more controlled. The joy of celebrating differences. The highlight of the semester was preparing for the school's annual Cultural Exchange Day. Each student was asked to showcase a part of their culture. My classmates wanted to know everything about Russia: the winters, the foods, the dances, the music. I decided to introduce them to a traditional Russian tea ceremony. I brought samovars, teacups, honey, and a few homemade piroshki. I explained how we greet guests, serve tea, and the etiquette involved. The reaction was priceless. They were fascinated, then delightedly confused, then utterly entertained. One boy tried to drink tea directly from the samovar. Another girl asked if she could dip her fried banana in honey instead of the tea. By the end of the day, everyone had a little Russian flair in their hearts, and I had a little Filipino warmth in mine. Funny misadventures, when cultures collide. Of course, not every day was smooth sailing. Humor often came from misunderstandings, language barriers, and my sometimes over-serious Russian nature. I remember one rainy afternoon during recess. I stepped outside, umbrella in hand, trying to avoid getting wet. But a group of kids, seeing an opportunity, splashed puddles directly in my direction. I froze, horrified. Why are you doing this? I asked, drenched and sputtering. They laughed and said, "It's fun! You must join!" Before I knew it, I was jumping into puddles, laughing until my stomach hurt. My neat Russian composure had melted away in the rain, replaced with something freer, lighter, and surprisingly joyous. Another time, a student tried to teach me karaoke. I had never sung in public in my life. I tried My Heart Will Go On in Russian, and it came out terrible. My classmates didn't care. They clapped, sang along, and even recorded it on their phones. Somehow, failing spectacularly turned into a moment of bonding. Life lessons beyond the textbook. Beyond the laughter and food, I began noticing deeper lessons. Filipino students approach life differently. Mistakes are opportunities for learning, not shame. Friendship is a priority. Respect is earned through kindness, not fear. Community is everything. One evening, our school faced a small crisis. A typhoon had caused minor flooding near the campus. Students and teachers worked together to move supplies, help stranded families, and make sure everyone was safe. I watched in awe as they coordinated with energy and calm, joking even as they worked. I realized then that my education wasn't just about reading textbooks or memorizing formulas. It was about learning resilience, compassion, and humility, heartwarming connections. By the end of the school year, I had formed bonds I never expected. Teachers had become mentors, classmates were more like family, and even small moments, a shared snack, a joke, a dance, felt monumental. One day, Liza handed me a small notebook. Inside were messages from every student in the class, words of encouragement, jokes, doodles, and even a few heartfelt thank yous. I flipped through it slowly, tears welling up. I had come to the Philippines thinking I would teach, but I had learned far more than I ever could have imagined. I had learned how to laugh without fear, share without hesitation, and live with an openness I never experienced in Russia. And in return, I had taught them a little about my culture, my language, and my heritage. Closing reflections. Looking back, being a Russian student in a Filipino school was more than a cultural exchange. It was a life-changing experience. I learned that education goes beyond grades and exams. It exists in laughter, in shared meals, in playful teasing, and in acts of kindness. I realized that while I had traveled across continents to learn, the most valuable lessons had been in the simplest things: a smile, a handshake, a bite of halo halo, a puddle jump, a song sung off-key. The Philippines had given me not just knowledge, but warmth. Not just friendships, but family. Not just memories, but a new way of seeing the world. And I knew that even when I returned to Russia, the lessons, laughter, and love I found here would never leave me. Because a Filipino school doesn't just educate, it transforms.